Hello everybody. It is October 1st, 2025 here in the United States of America, and in today's video I'm going to talk about the comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict, as it's being called by President Donald J. Trump. Now, this is a proposed treaty to end the Gaza war, which has been going on now for quite some time, that has resulted in horrendous civilian casualties and outcry from around the world. Now, whether either side accepts this series of proposals is to be seen, although many people are fairly pessimistic about it. Many assume that neither the Israeli government or Hamas will accept anything at this point other than complete and total political and military victory for their side. Hamas is trying to hold on long enough in Gaza that international pressure mounts on Israel to the point where the Netanyahu government is dissolved and a new government takes their place that would be more, maybe perhaps more willing to give meaningful concessions to the Palestinians, and the Israelis are doing everything in their power to use military force to completely demoralize Hamas's leadership to the point where they completely give up and relinquish control of Gaza directly to the Israelis. Now, the Israelis would prefer to have complete and total control over Gaza, so it is no longer an enclave that they see within their own borders where a hostile force is going to be ever present. Now, regardless of what anyone thinks of this conflict, I'm not here as an activist for either side. I'm just reiterating or talking about the viewpoint that each party has in regards to this conflict. This is something I know that is people are very emotionally invested in this conflict. Understandably so, I get it, but this video is meant to just be informative, and I'm going to give my personal opinion on whether or not this treaty, this set of proposals, would actually achieve anything, or if I think any of the points are something that is viable long term for any kind of meaningful peace. So, anyways, let's begin, shall we? So, the first point in this is Gaza will be a de-radicalized, terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Now, threat to its neighbors, specifically Israel. Gaza is not really seen as much of a threat to anyone else in the region directly other than Israel. And terror-free means Hamas will no longer be present as an organization within Gaza's borders. Now, much of the world does view Hamas as a terrorist organization, whereas another good bit of the world views them as a organization of freedom fighters, if you will. Now, Hamas is reported to have carried out significant atrocities against Israelis during the October 7th operation. Again, I'm not going to get into that. Accusations of atrocities often get thrown around in wartime, and it takes quite some time to find out what the truth is. Case in point, the babies in incubators from the Gulf War, the accusations against the Iraqi army that they were actually taking babies out of incubators and throwing them against walls, well, that turned out to be completely false. I'm not saying all accusations of atrocities are false, but again, I would rather err on the side of caution and not assume something to be true just because I read it online. Propaganda is a thing, and all sides utilize it for their own ends. Now, do I think it's possible that Hamas will leave? Perhaps, if they feel that their goals cannot be achieved in any way, and that the fight will simply just cause more Palestinians to die and achieve nothing. Perhaps they would leave at that point. It's hard to say whether or not that would actually happen. I think time will tell if Hamas completely leaving the Gaza Strip is something that's actually possible, or they'd be willing to do. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza who have suffered more than enough. Now, this is directly from the office of President Donald J. Trump, and he wants to show sympathy with the Gazans because he has been accused of being complicit in what has been described by many people as, and I won't use the G word here, but let's just say a military operation with no consideration taken towards civilian casualties. Civilian casualties have been fairly horrific. Gaza is a very densely populated region, and launching bombs into this region in any large number is going to result in significant civilian casualties. So President Trump here is trying to seem like he is sympathetic to the plight of people in Gaza. I'm guessing that this is being done to try to curry favor with the Gazans, so maybe they would pressure Hamas into accepting some kind of deal. If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed-upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended. Battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete staged withdrawal. Now, I'm not sure if that's talking about a complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip or just a line within the Gaza Strip in areas that Israel already controls. Now, it would be crucial if peace were to be achieved that all military operations would cease immediately, and it would be a very tenuous time, because during that time, and we've seen this again with ceasefires, if any rockets go off, if any bombs land, this whole deal is out the window. But a step like this, it's pretty common to see in any kind of like peace agreement or ceasefire. Military withdrawals are it's usually part of it. Really nothing of note there. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. And now, I'm not entirely sure. I do believe that Benjamin Netanyahu has more or less begrudgingly accepted this. So I'm not sure if that 72-hour mark has started or the Israeli government has to publicly, formally accept it. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really seen anything on Twitter, and I follow a lot of news sites about this at this point. So that's seems to be up in the air. But yes, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Yes, Israel wants all of its hostages that were captured on October 7th to be returned. Now, here's the interesting part. Once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October 7th, 2023, including all women and children detained in that context. For every Israeli hostage whose remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. Now, one of the goals that Hamas actually had during October 7th was to take hostages in exchange for Palestinians that have been captured by the IDF and were being held in Israeli custody. That was the entire point of the operation, was to go out and find captives, if you will, to exchange and use as leverage. Now, funny enough, it seems that Hamas would actually be given that. They are getting Palestinians exchanged for the Israelis that they hold. So that's an interesting concession to Hamas. That I don't want to say that. I don't think it doesn't entirely achieve every objective they wanted. I'm sure they wanted far more hostages back than that on October 7th, but that actually does achieve one of their original goals to their operation in the first place. So it's interesting to see if the Israelis will actually concede to that, because I think maybe in their mind that would give Hamas some kind of legitimacy. Okay. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Now, this is pretty standard when any kind of peace treaty is offered. The average run-of-the-mill fighter on the losing side is usually offered some kind of amnesty. It happened in World War II. Pretty much any other war. Once one side lays down their arms, it's fairly practical and reasonable to allow many of the average fighting man to turn in their weapons and go home and all is forgiven. Now that's usually done to try to curry favor and with the local population and not incite any further resistance. Now, because if Israel went in there and tried to forcefully capture every single member of Hamas, then I'm sure that this conflict would start up again immediately, because people would defend themselves, because, well, what's their choice: death or an Israeli prison or execution. Oftentimes people in those situations will continue to fight, because what do they have to lose? But yes, amnesty, that's pretty common to see in peace treaties. Not really surprised by that. Would Israel acquiesce to that demand? I'm sure Hamas would. That's beneficial to them. But would Israel allow former members of Hamas to exist within Palestinian society? Would they trust those former members not to take up arms again at the drop of a hat? We'll see. But this was I guarantee you a concession that Israel had to make to get the full public backing of President Trump, because people also need to keep in mind too that President Trump wants and this is based on his own rhetoric, wants a Middle East that the U.S. could completely withdraw from. And to do that, there has to be lasting peace between the Israelis and the other Arab countries in the region. There has to be. Or because of Israeli influence in the United States, the United States will be constantly dragged back into this conflict. So I'm sure that President Trump, despite what people say about him having, being completely under the thumb of Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sure is probably exerting pressure on Netanyahu to accept something just so he can achieve his foreign policy goals. And I'm sure, and President Trump's not the only one in the American government that at this point is probably frustrated that our foreign policy seems to be constantly hamstrung by our alliance with Israel. We want to leave the Middle East and stay out. That is one of the expressed goals of this administration. Okay. Upon accepting of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with that what was included in the January 19th, 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals, bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. Now listen, untold billions would have to be spent in the Gaza Strip to restore it back to the way it was. I'm not sure what was proposed on January 19th, but you're talking millions. I mean, you're maybe not millions, but you're talking an ungodly amount of food, because most of the infrastructure is destroyed. These people need to get food from somewhere. I mean, you're talking about billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of humanitarian aid. Now, who's all paying for that? I'm sure Gulf states are probably going to contribute a good bit, but the place is in ruins. And to rebuild Gaza is going to take years to do. Now, this is, again, what will the quality of life be for Gazans who are currently living in the rubble? They're going to remain in their camps and tents for quite some time, because, again, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people right now who are homeless because their homes have been destroyed. Sure, that sounds nice on paper. I'm sure the Palestinians would appreciate aid and food being sent in at this point, but again, this isn't going to be a quick fix to any of the problems actually occurring in Gaza right now. Entry of distribution and aid in Gaza will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agencies. Okay, so this is basically saying that Israel and Hamas will not interfere in any way, and that all aid will be provided by a third party, and it looks like the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19th, 2025 agreement. Now, I'm not familiar with the January 19th agreement. I probably should be. It's something I am going to have to look into, but yes, a third party being involved in this would probably be crucial. Neither side trusts the other to handle humanitarian aid and to keep both sides happy. Well, it looks like a third party would have to be involved to ensure that enough aid is being sent in and that aid isn't being stolen or misused in any way. Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, that's interesting language, technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people of Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision of a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump, with other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. Okay, so that one I'm just going to say I disagree with because of Tony Blair's direct involvement with the Iraq War. He's not exactly a popular man in the Middle East. I'm not sure why he's being involved in this. It seems that a better person could have been found. That's just my opinion. The body will be, this is a very long paragraph here, I'll just kind of sum it up. Interesting that it'll be headed by President Trump. I'm sure he is going to be, and again, so the Palestinians would probably see this and be like, well, if it's headed by President Trump, obviously he's going to be influenced by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, so whatever decisions Trump makes are going to be decisions at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu. So again, I think the Palestinians will be a little distrusting of that. A Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Yeah, and this is pretty well known. Trump wants to turn Gaza into some kind of Riviera. Now, he sees that as beneficial to those people living there. Trump's idea of prosperity is material wealth. It's the kind of man that Trump is. But I'm not sure the Gazans are the kinds of people that you can just throw money and fancy things at. They've lived under fairly harsh conditions for quite some time, and they're hardened people, so I'm not entirely sure if just promising them a Riviera on the Mediterranean is going to be all that appealing. Synthesize the security and governance frameworks to attract and facilitate. Well, they want to attract investors into Gaza to help rebuild Gaza and to make Gaza what they wish to see it be. Like I said the last couple times, a Riviera in the Mediterranean. But for investors to be there, Hamas cannot have any kind of presence, and there has to be a stable government devoid of any revolutionary elements that would be seen as having close ties to, if not outright being terrorists. A special economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. This is about setting up Gaza as a zone of economic development. No one will be forced to leave Gaza. Now, this is key right here because this is actually pretty contrary to what I think the most hardline Israelis actually wanted. They did want the expulsion from Palestinians from Gaza. They wanted the area to be colonized and taken over formally by Israel. They wanted the Palestinians resettled somewhere else, and even President Trump floated that idea publicly, though, to great backlash. Now, people need to keep in mind this is not a popular idea. With much of the world, they do see it as ethnic cleansing. Now, no one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them an opportunity to build a better Gaza. Now, again, though, with the condition that Gaza is left in, I do think a sizable number of people would stay, but quite a few people leave. But where are they going to go? Are they going to be given refugee status in another Arab country, a Western country? Who's taking them in? That's to be seen. Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza. It's not surprising. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors. So yeah, they want to make sure that Hamas disarms, disbands, gets rid of all potential staging areas for future armed resistance. And they want third parties to go in and make sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain. And it says New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and a peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. Now, that is entirely dependent on Israel. Will Israel accept an enclave of Palestinians that continue to exist within its territory? Will hardline Israelis consider Israel to be whole while still having this enclave present? Now, are they still going to have to wall off this enclave? What about the status of the people living there? Are they going to be given Israeli citizenship? Are they going to be allowed to leave and roam Israel freely? Is Gaza basically going to be considered another country with a tightly controlled border? Those are some interesting points. Now, this is a 20-point plan, so I'm almost through it. And I know this is a longer video than I typically put up, but there's a lot to read here. Where did I leave off at? Oh, yeah. A guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations, that New Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or people. So, yeah, this is to get all political factions that have engaged in armed resistance out of Gaza completely. Now, this is to keep the Israelis happy, because the only way the Israelis would ever be comfortable again with a Palestinian enclave to exist within what they see as Israeli territory is they have to be completely disarmed. That's the only way the Israelis would ever accept this. And again, though, the Israelis had to accept a plan like this because of mounting international pressure. They were never going to be allowed to forcefully ethnically cleanse Gaza, and because they're hemorrhaging support within the United States, and the United States is their most key ally, they need the United States. They see it as connected as a matter of their survival. It's existential. They need the U.S. This is probably something to try to placate reduce some of the backlash against Israel from inside the United States. So this is, again, like a concession Israel had to make. Now, to do so, though, I'm sure Israel needed some reassurances that third parties would do their jobs and make sure that there is no longer any armed resistance in Palestine. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. Now, this is very important because the complete annexation of Gaza was I'm pretty sure, a stated goal of many higher-ups within the Israeli government, and is a very well-known position of Israeli hardliners. They want Gaza. They also want a greater Israel. Now, having to publicly give this up is a concession that Israel is making, though, and this would be seen, I'm sure, by some hardliners as a victory for Hamas, because Palestine gets to keep, or Gaza gets to keep, its territorial sovereignty. Israel will not fully annex it. There will be no IDF presence within Gaza. But again, though, I'm not really sure how this would work. Again, would they just control a border? Would they let people in and out? I'm not entirely sure. The IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF. According to an agreement, they will make sure with the transitional authority until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza. So this is a phased withdrawal. Israel isn't going to withdraw all at once, but it promises to eventually completely withdraw from the territory of Gaza. Now, keep in mind, this would be extremely tenuous, because once somebody shoots at an Israeli soldier, then I'm sure the Israelis would go back on this agreement very quickly, and the odds of that happening, whether staged or real, are pretty high. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scale-up aid operation, will proceed, and the terror-free areas handed over from the IDF to the ISF. An interfaith dialogue process will be established based on the values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence to try to change the mindsets and narratives of Palestinians and Israelis by emphasizing the benefits that can be derived from peace. Well, that's interesting, because I think that's acknowledging that the Israelis aren't totally justified in their feelings towards the Palestinians, and the Palestinians may have a legitimate grievance. Now, it's also suggesting that the Israelis have a legitimate grievance as well with the Palestinians, but the fact that this clause is even in there shows that I think President Trump is cognizant to the idea that Palestinians have a legitimate grievance against the Israeli government for the Nakba. Now, again, I'm sure this was a bitter pill to swallow for the Israelis, because in their mind, well, they absolutely did nothing wrong and never do. Gaza redevelopment advances, and when the PA reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may be finally in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Now, this is why I'm very skeptical of the Israelis actually accepting this long term, because they have been pretty adamant there will be no Palestinian state. They want the whole of the West Bank and Gaza. That is their long-term plan. That's not conjecture. They outright say this. So it makes me hesitant to think that the Israelis actually even intend to accept this peace agreement with that in there, because they said absolutely under no circumstances will they accept the Palestinian state. So, I don't know. It's surprising to see that in there. But again, this is all contingent on everything going very well, and oftentimes things don't go very well. The United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. Okay. Well, so the United States plans to mediate between the two groups. Again, though, the issue with that is the United States is seen by many to be heavily influenced by the Israelis, so whatever the United States proposes can be seen as something originally proposed by the Israelis, and they're probably always going to side more with the Israelis because of the Israeli influence within the American government than they ever would the Palestinians. So I don't know. I see things in this set of proposals that would benefit either side, and I also see some things in here that I think both parties would vehemently disagree with. But I think neither party is really in a position to get entirely what they want out of this conflict. There's going to have to be some kind of compromise. The Israeli government is not going away. It has the full backing of the United States, and despite what the Europeans say, there's still mostly the full backing of the Europeans. The Gulf states aren't going to launch a war against Israel anytime soon. It's not going to happen. I don't really know what the end game is for Hamas. Resist long enough to where Israel falls apart, I guess, and the Arab countries finally rise up against Israel. I'm not entirely sure, but then again, the Israelis, the hardline Israelis, I don't think are because of mounting international pressure and the possibility of losing a great deal of support in the United States. I think they're a bit concerned at this point that, well, time is not on their side, and it might not be worth the cost to keep sending conscripts into Gaza and fighting through this pile of rubble for another couple years. And this resistance of Hamas fighters is ongoing, and Israeli soldiers, the casualties of Israeli soldiers continue to mount. Israel is facing internal problems of its own. People aren't too happy with Benjamin Netanyahu's government. There's been protests. The economy is not doing so well, many would say, and they're having issues with conscription and maintaining the number of troops that they actually need in the field to continue this conflict. So again, I think based upon the facts on the ground, both sides will have to come to some kind of compromise. Whether this compromise is actually it's hard to say, but we'll see. But anyways, I just wanted to read through it, go over it, and give my general thoughts. Will the Israelis accept this? There's some points in here I think they absolutely wouldn't accept long term. They might try to accept this to save face with the assumption that the Palestinians or Hamas will break this agreement. Also, too, with Hamas and the Palestinians, some things in here seem to benefit the Palestinians, but again, the problem is they don't trust the Israelis and they don't trust the United States government. And if the United States government is a key mediator in most of this, then I am not sure that they would trust this peace treaty, these proposals, to have any kind of weight or merit behind them. But time will tell. We'll see. Let's just pray for the best and hope for peace at this point. But anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. It's a bit longer than normal. It's almost a half an hour, so I hope you stuck with me through this whole thing. Usually I like to keep these videos around 10 or 15 minutes. You know, I think that you start losing people's attention span after that. But there's a lot to go through on here, so I had a lot to read through. But anyways, I will be back Saturday with another video, and this weekend actually I think I'm going to try my first live stream, so that'll be interesting. I might do that on Friday, but I'll keep everybody posted. But anyways, hope everyone out there has a good night, and God bless.